Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Massive development today as to the future of the Call of Duty League, with rumours emerging that the London Royal Ravens are going to be moving to Charlotte, North Carolina. And if that doesn't work, potentially Mexico City or even Washington DC. What's going on here? Does it mean there's never going to be a London event again? Maybe not though, because apparently rumours are circulating this is just the beginning of the end of geolocation in the CDL, which actually may be a massively positive thing. But very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. First of all, the World Championship is just around the corner. Begins tomorrow on the Thursday. It's come kind of quickly and the teams are getting ready to go. Kind of always surprises me in a way how LA is actually not that far away from Vegas to such an extent that it is drivable. And that's what the 100 Thieves guys are doing. Here they are in the van. Yesterday, the 100 Thieves van. It's pretty cool stuff. And maybe LA Thieves will actually become 100 Thieves. And we'll discuss that in a few minutes time. There was some pretty fun content as well from stuff like this as well, so here they are getting ready to go. I don't know if all of them went at the same time. I thought it was funny as well that this is, I'm pretty sure, I mean it's got to be right, this is Brandon Novus, their general manager, who's driving the van, which is like, I guess someone's going to drive it, right? But I just think it's pretty funny how this has all turned out. So anyway, they get in the back of it, here's Drazah, and they did a bit of funny content with him actually, where they pretend to leave him behind here, and they're like, oh Draz, you're going to Champs, and he's hitchhiking, and then they don't pick him up, they leave him by the side of the roads, and off they continue their way to Vegas. So yeah, most teams of course will be flying out. Drazah gets left behind and then eventually gets picked back up again, it seems. The OpTic guys are also flying out. We'll discuss that in a second. There was also this from Afro, I think probably his first tweet that he's done really since being benched by the Minnesota Rokkr, flying to Vegas, so he will be there, right, because he is the sub, I guess, for the team. Not playing at Champs is the worst feeling ever. Haven't really spoken about getting benched, but it hit me hard, especially being so close to Champs. This is another thing that I hadn't really talked about too much though, is like, let's say you look at a team like Boston Breach, for example. They made it to Champs, but Nero and Vivid, two players that did an awful lot to get them there, don't even get to play, right? Which is, I get it, right? It's how the league works, but it feels a little bit bad if you're a guy like Afro who did a lot of work this season, and early on they got a top 3 with him, right, and all this type of stuff. And yes, the decision they've made has worked out. I don't think it necessarily worked out because it was Afro that was gone. I think it worked out more so because Attach getting dropped never made sense in the first place, and Fame, if you're going to bring him in, is a sub player, and Bance has been doing a great job individually lately. So I think Afro can find a spot next year. I think at the start of the season he was absolutely the standout of this team, and I think he will be back in the league next year somewhere or another. There was also this from OpTic confirming they're flying out to Vegas. Kind of funny that there was no picture attached to this, because you guys might remember the picture that they attached to the one where they flew to Toronto. They were in like first class or premium economy, whatever it was, and I believe Hex said in a podcast afterwards, he was like, yeah, no first class for you guys ever again, or at least if you play like that, right, basically was his point. So maybe no picture because they're flying economy this time, but anyway, they're going to make it there. Also, the talent was announced, right, for the event, the usual suspects, plus a couple of other special guests, which is very nice to see. So the usual suspects, Puckett, etc., all the guys. Lottie's going to be there, as we mentioned. This is the one that people are really noticing, though, is Clayster's going to be there. So this is really cool stuff. I don't know if this is going to be like a step towards Clay's next ventures in Call of Duty, right, because, look, he might still compete next year. I hope that he does, but he might not. He might go into coaching. He might get an offer as a general manager. He might get an offer to be an analyst, right, or a caster on the desk. I mean, you know, we've seen what's happened with Nameless over the last several years. Who knows? I don't really see Clayster as being that guy full time, at least yet, but it's nice to see. And of course, Clay did make it to Vegas after all. We'll see that in a second. Also, Shift is there. Of course, Shift is going to be there anyway, I think, for the Challengers stuff. A lot of the Challengers casters are going to be there for the weekend, but Shift's also doing additional stuff on the broadcast side, which is great to see. As he says, I'll be on the ground floor running interviews and doing some sideline reporting all weekend long, so love to see it. And as Clayster says, had to make it to Champs somehow, see y'all in Vegas. So really cool stuff. I know that it's always good fun when they get the pros up on the desk and stuff like this to just discuss the games. And even the Minnesota like opening weekend or whatever it was in the Modern Warfare days when Scump was up on the desk and all this, like it was just a good time. So hopefully that can happen this weekend as well. And I just thought this is really nice to see. Also, Guy Blaze is going to be there. Kind of funny that they just either forgot him on the original talent graphic or they just couldn't fit him on somehow. But Blaze is going to be doing, I'm guessing, some of the stage hosting and the interviews and that type of stuff as well. So anyway, let's move on to the really interesting topic that I wanted to dive into, and that is this report's coming out of Kevin Hitt in the Sports Business Journal on the London Royal Ravens leaving London and not being London anymore and heading to the East Coast. So this is the way the article describes it. And first of all, before we get there, we'll say that so London's, their ownership has been a mess the last several years. To be honest, like the running of that organisation organization has been terrible. Lots of stories on that one from behind the scenes. But they were owned by Rogue or whatever it was, or like partnered with Rogue, and then they're owned by Rekt Global. I think Rekt Global were the organization that owns both Rogue, which was an esports team, and London Royal Ravens. And then they partnered with some sort of like Web3 weird company called Infinite Reality that they said was worth like 2 billion or something wild. So they're now technically the owner. But then Spanish organization KOI with eBay and a load of the big Spanish streamers, they came in to now own and operate the team. So the ownership situation is kind of confusing, but the understanding is that these guys now effectively own London, and we actually thought last year they might try and rebrand it to either move to Madrid or field a Spanish team or something to that effect, and that was the rumor at the time, and I believe they suggested interest in doing that, but they couldn't exactly execute it because either it was too late with the league or they couldn't get the permission or something like that. And you can understand, if you're the CDL, most of your league is in America anyway. Having some footprint in Europe and in London is pretty sensible, given the fact that, you know, a large percentage of the audience, probably 20, at least on my channel, 25%-ish of the audience is from the UK. That's a big deal. You want a UK team. So I was wondering, even if they wanted to move it to like Madrid or Barcelona, would they actually get the permission to do that? We now believe they are going to be out of there, and they're moving to North Carolina. So this is as the article describes. The Call of Duty League's Royal Ravens will be moving away from their London home with its eyes set on Charlotte, North Carolina, which is pretty wild, right? Like, you know, just of all the cities that it could possibly be, Charlotte, North Carolina is like further down the list, I think, than many people would have expected. Sources close to the league tell the Sports Business Journal of the inaugural, or one of the inaugural 12 teams, the Ravens have struggled to find a solid fan base for multiple reasons, and this is like just incorrect, to be honest, but I guess initially this was a factor for consideration, and in fairness, in the early days of Cold War, when Zero was having to play from the UK online and like that kickoff classic weekends, it wasn't ideal. But as he says in the article I kept here, it's like connection latency issues while playing games and scrimmaging from London have proved a disadvantage. But they've never actually been based in London, right? Yes, they're the London team, but they've actually been based in general for the last few years in North Carolina. That's where they were set up year 1, year 2, maybe even Vanguard as well. I think it was Vanguard as well. I think this year they're based in LA, which is a little bit confusing just because it's a bit expensive. I don't know why they've done that, but for the first 3 years, I think, of the CDL, they were based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Like, that's where they were set up. And now they apparently want to move them there kind of like full time and potentially become the Charlotte Royal Ravens, or completely rebrand. Now, I don't think they're going to become the Charlotte Royal Ravens, and I'll explain why just now. But anyway, if that doesn't work and they can't go to Charlotte, they want to go to either Mexico City or Washington, D.C., which would also be pretty wild. And the Mexico one is a little bit interesting just because, you know, Spanish stuff. We know they're owned by the Spaniards. We did wonder what's going to be going on there. And there's been discussions that, look, Miami Heretics is apparently going to be a thing as well. They are going to partner with Florida Mutineers. They're going to become Miami Heretics or something to that effect. And they are going to field a Spanish team. The actual entire roster was rumored about a month or so ago, I think, at this point. So would Ravens do the same thing? Would they entirely rebrand to make this happen? We don't really know. But yeah, that's the current rumor, that Ravens are going to relocate and possibly completely rebrand. I also noticed, like, when you're actually at the venues here, I'd never really thought about this before, but when you see all the team logos go past, they all look like team logos. And the London one is just a bird, and it looks so out of place compared to a lot of the other logos, to be honest. Like, it's kind of cool, but when you see it next to the other logos, it just looks so weird, to be honest, compared to a lot of what the other teams have come up with, which is, I guess it's good and bad in some sense, but I wouldn't be surprised if as a brand, this kind of disappears and they go down a different route. Now, why could this actually be a positive? Because I'm sure many UK fans are sitting there thinking, well, hang on a second, we've got no London team, there's no London events. Now, to be honest, London as a franchise was so bad anyway, they never wanted to host an event. So, you know, it wasn't a great starting point. But if there's no London team, then surely there's no London event. This isn't necessarily the case. And the reason why is because this might well be step one of the organizations in the league removing the geolocation element. This has been a big talking point ever since the CDL came around. It was like, why do we need the teams to be kind of sucked into a particular geolocation, a particular city, a particular state? Why is it necessary necessary in esports? I don't think that it honestly is. You don't have the same home away thing that you have in regular sports, as much as they try to push that in year one, and maybe that would provide some benefit, but I don't think it's necessary. You look at leagues like Valorant, you look at leagues like League of Legends, and yes, there's problems with those leagues, but they are franchise, partnership level leagues, and their organizations are just their organizations. It's hard enough to build a brand as is, and when you're 100 Thieves and you've got to think about 100 Thieves and LA Thieves, when you're, let's say, Minnesota Rokkr, you've got to think about version 1, which is kind of like their esports brands, and the Minnesota Rokkr, and of course their Overwatch League teams and all this type of stuff. You know, it gets more complicated, and is it necessary? I'm not so sure. It's clear that many of the owners over the last couple of years have made this point, especially Hex, right? Hex has made this many times, and he said, look, OpTic, we're not limited to Texas. Yes, we might have Texas as our location, at least now. It used to be Chicago before that, from the start of the CDL, but it's not necessary to be located there. They've got fans all around the world. They've got fans probably over in Japan and over in Australia, right, that they want to kind of get to, and the Texas thing isn't super necessary. And as Kevin Hitt says, I don't think Activision Blizzard leagues are going to rely on geographical team bases for much longer if what I am hearing comes true. So this implies that for both the Overwatch League and for the CDL, geolocation might become a thing of the past. OpTic Texas might just become OpTic Gaming, and the other franchises, like let's say Royal Ravens, it might just disappear and they might become an entirely new name with no, they're based in Charlotte, as in the team lives in Charlotte and plays out of there, but there's nothing related to Charlotte in their branding. And this would mean that as it was pre-CDL, we could start to have events in London anyway. You know, we could have an event in Sydney. There might not be a Sydney team. We could have an event there, just like we did pre-CDL. We could have events back in London. Gfinity could run them or whatever, like they used to do back in the day, without needing a London team to be the home team there. So this to me is a positive. I know that Adam Adamu has been talking about this as well from Toronto. I actually discussed this with him briefly at the Major in Toronto, and his perspective was that Toronto as an organization, as a franchise, they wouldn't have the home crowd that they do if they were Splice, right? Because Splice was the organization that they kind of were. Overactive Media came along, they become Toronto Ultra. If they were just Splice, would you see as many Toronto Ultra jerseys at the Toronto Major as you do with the Minnesota Rokkr guys? Would you see as many like Minnesota jerseys at those home series if they were just version 1? Possibly, and probably not. I do think that the geolocation does help activate that local audience. Is it overall better for the franchise? I'm not convinced, especially for some of them, but for some of them it works and they've done a good job locally. So maybe there's a world in which they can do both. Maybe the geolocation is no longer necessary, but it might be still allowed. Is there a problem having OpTic Gaming and Toronto Ultra in the same league? Is that weird? Does it really matter? If Toronto Ultra want to keep their branding as Toronto, why, should they be forced to go back to being just Ultra or Splice or something? Maybe not. But if other organizations do want to split off from their city and decide, you know what, instead of being the Seattle Surge, we're just gonna, come up with something else. Or Luminosity Gaming Rights used to be the brand that they had. So it sounds to me that this potential move is a step towards getting rid of geolocation, or at least the necessity for geolocation from the league. And, Hex has made this point plenty of times that the green wall is wider than Texas, which it is. And if they could become OpTic Gaming again, I'm sure they would do that in a heartbeat. And the possibility might be around the corner. So I actually think that despite, I don't know what's going to happen to Ravens, right? Whether they're going to rebrand, whether their team is just going to be based out there and they're going to be called something different, and whether they're still going to not spend anybody and be pretty badly managed, right? But they've got new management now, so maybe it could be a more positive sign for them. But I think the key point is that, as Kevin Hitt seems to believe and has been talked about by Adam Adamu as well and other teams over the last couple of months, that it's possible that next season it's no longer city-based franchising, which to me does have a lot of positive impact. So very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.